They knew what they've been doing for thousands of years. Human sound and energy is possibly what holds up the matrix, or that grid in the sky. People are the source of energy. When I first saw the matrix, I had no idea what the hell Morpheus was talking about. And this is when we realize that these ancient sites are just advanced technology on a gigantic scale. If you just look at that, you see these obelisks, giant antennas sticking up into the sky. And the obelisks ring like bells. In fact, this one, I was there with Hugh Newman in 2012. And I went into one side and I said, just tap this thing with another stone. Just tap it. I put my head against it and it was unbelievable. It was, I was listening to one of my ringing stones in my museum. This thing rings like a bell. And I went, oh my God, it's the same bloody thing. These are just giant antennae, either putting stuff up or bringing stuff down from the sky. And I realized then, I started looking at it, these temples in Egypt, they're not what we're told they are. They're not temples, they're not places of worship to offer food or kiss butt of the gods or none of that stuff. It's just our baby-like perception of what's going on here. Too many pillars, not enough space, and when you start looking at just like everything else, when you start looking at the aerial pictures, your whole perspective changes. And that's when I started to realize, oh my goodness, this is not what we thought it was. Now that I know about the stone circles, I know about the pyramids, I know about Stonehenge, it's all to do with resonators and resonating devices. This is no different. We're just looking at giant templates for giant circuit boards. And that's what these are. Just giant circuit boards for technology of a size that we can't imagine. And microprocessors suddenly become very large macro processors. And these so-called worshipping places for worshipping, like the Parthenon and those two on the left, those are just gigantic macro processors that are part of a giant circuit board. The comparison to that, it's almost, like, really? And when you start researching what's around the Great Pyramid, you realize that this is all just part of it, all to do with resonance. Angkor Wat, when you combine water and silica, you're dealing with the two most abundant elements on earth, all to do with energy, energetic, storing of memory, storing of knowledge. You know that water actually holds even more memory than silica or than quartz. And even Saksai Raman is not a fortress, a mountaintop fortress. It's just a giant circuit board on top of a mountain. And those walls, those very incredible walls that lead up to it, there's 3 walls there. It means there are 2 channels. And I suspect the reason they got that weird shape is so that they actually create when the wind blows there's a prevailing wind that comes from the edge of the mountain. And when that wind blows in there, it probably creates a specific frequency based on the shape of those walls. And that frequency is then channeled into that machine on top of the mountain. Borobudur in Indonesia is just a spectacular example of a machine that harnesses all the energy up, focuses it up and amplifies it right up to the top, where it shoots it up into the sky. For what? Your guess is as good as mine right now. And human sound and energy is possibly what holds up the matrix, or that grid in the sky. And we start seeing this when we recognize that this is the Parthenon in Greece. Again, you've got that giant macro processor in the middle. It's not a temple, it's just that was a circuit board itself, but it's really badly destroyed. And that circuit board is connected to these perfect amphitheaters. There's one here, there's another one there. And those amphitheaters, you should know by now, they're incredibly, very powerful acoustic devices. You can whisper on that stage and you can hear it everywhere. So you fill that with people, you make them shout like our people do at Manchester, somewhere at the stadium. Not sure if I should say Manchester City or Manchester United, don't want to get into trouble. At one of the soccer stadiums, you know how loud it gets in there? You can't hear yourself think on that field. The players have to shout at each other because the crowd is so loud. So the energy of our human voices is so powerful when it's amplified through the resonance of the crowd and just putting the numbers of people up. You put a bunch of people in the amphitheater, you make them scared or excited, you make them cry or clap their hands or scream and shout. That energy gets channeled into the circuit board and it starts a circuit board through the energy of the people. So here's another example. There's your circuit board really broken down. There's your amphitheater and beautifully connected into the circuit board by a lovely row of vibrating pillars. There's another one. Circuit board on top of the mountain, really badly destroyed. There's your amphitheater on the side. That seems to have been rebuilt in more recent times, but there it is. And here's another one. This is in Algeria, North Africa. There's amphitheaters right in the middle of the circuit board. They didn't play around. They really just put it right where they needed it. And nothing has changed in 2018. Nothing has changed. We just keep plodding along and we have no clue what the bloody hell is going on. The temples have just become churches with giant steeples. Who came up with the design of a church and the tower and the steeple going up into the sky? Who came up with that concept? Really? Why? Why isn't there a hut, a mud hut, or a grass hut, or a flat roof? Or why is it these? Because they knew what they've been doing for thousands of years. People create sound and energy, and they're filled with fear. They clap their hands. They do all kinds of stuff in these places. And all that energy is channeled up into the sky, non-stop. And when you look at the mosques, some of the mosques are actually mind-boggling because they actually have these little towers on them, and they have these little balls on top of the towers. And I've noticed that the balls range from 1 to 5, I believe, balls. So it's almost like they're creating a different pulse as they're sending the sound frequency up into the sky. So they're creating a different pulse rate. Poof, 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 poof. I don't know. You figure that out. And this place here is obviously, that's a big daddy of them all. And nothing has changed. Business centers, cities are just giant energy grids, just circuit boards, making huge amount of sound and noise. Every building vibrates. You've got a beautiful example in London, that giant obelisk in London. That's just a perfect example. Generating huge amounts of energy, noise, and guess what? Just like the stone circles, the cities are also connected by channels that keep making a noise and channeling the noise. We call them highways. Never stops making a noise. And that's exactly what I believe Morpheus meant when he said, people are the source of energy. When I first saw the Matrix, I had no idea what the hell Morpheus was talking about. But whoever wrote this and whoever presented the information into the Matrix movie clearly had a much better understanding of this than I had at the time. So it is the creation is all to do with sound and resonance. And that is the most spectacular thing that we can wrap our head around.
Nicholas Roerich was a Russian painter, scenic designer and writer who's probably best known for his work with ballet russes and especially for his monumental historical sets. Roerich was also a mystic and traveller who visited India and Tibet to study Eastern philosophy and history, and also to search for rare manuscripts. There is some evidence to suggest that during the 1930s expedition to Mongolia, led by Roerich, backed by US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and something extremely strange was discovered. Some say that he found evidence for ancient technology, others that he unearthed a mysterious stone with strange powers. The enigmatic Nicholas Roerich. Roerich was born in St. Petersburg, Russia on October 9, 1874. He was fortunate to have been brought up in the contented environment of an upper middle-class Russian family with the advantages of contact with writers, artists and scientists who frequently came to visit him. After finishing university, he met Helena Shaposhnikov, a niece of the composer Musorgsky, and soon afterwards they married. Helena Roerich was a remarkable gifted woman, a gifted pianist and author of a number of books related to mysticism, including The Foundations of Buddhism and a Russian translation of Helena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. 1903 and 1904, the couple set off on a voyage of discovery to 40 cities throughout Russia. Roerich's intention was to contrast the styles and historical context of Russian architecture. However, he found that many of the historical structures had been neglected for centuries. Realizing their importance to Russia's cultural history, he set out to draw attention to the problem by painting a series of 75 works depicting the structures and also attempted to have them protected and preserved. archaeological treasures from the Stone Age were of particular interest to him, and soon he amassed a large collection of artifacts from that period. In 1920, he emigrated to the United States, and that same year, in New York, founded with his wife the Agni Yoga Society, an organization that combines elements of Eastern thought with modern Western moral philosophy. Řeřík was given the position of secretary of the School of the Society for the Encouragement of Art, later becoming its head, the first of a number of positions that he would hold as a teacher and spokesman for the arts. He brought an innovative and modern system of training in art to the society, organizing the teaching of all of the arts: painting, music, singing, dance, theatre, and also ceramics, painting on porcelain, pottery, and mechanical drawing in the same place. Řeřík seems to have had talents for synthesis, which enabled him to correlate many apparently contradictory subjects: the philosophical with the scientific, the Eastern wisdom with Western knowledge, for example. Whilst in America, the Řeříks planned a voyage to India. The couple had always wanted to visit there, and there is certainly an orientation towards Eastern spiritual values reflected in many of Řeřík's creative works at that time. A Voyage to the East. In 1923, Řeřík's dream finally came true when they embarked on their Central Asian tour. They landed in Bombay in December 1923, eventually visiting India, Chinese Turkestan, Altai, Mongolia, and Tibet. Nicholas later wrote about this expedition in his book Heart of Asia, in which he described these mysterious lands and enigmatic peoples. During the expedition, Řeřík's party apparently discovered enigmatic archaeological monuments and extremely rare manuscripts, though it's not clear now where those manuscripts are. One of the manuscripts was said to be a blueprint for an ancient Atlantean particle accelerator there, which he brought back to the US to be developed. In 1928, at the end of their major expedition, the family settled in the Kulu Valley, 6,500 feet up in the Himalayan foothills. Here they established the headquarters of the Urasvati Himalayan Research Institute, which was instituted to study the results of their expedition and of their forthcoming explorations. When Řeřík returned to the US in 1929, he was famous. James Walker, the mayor of New York, greeted him at the City Hall, and President Franklin Roosevelt met him. Nicholas Řeřík died in Kulu on December 13, 1947. Řeřík is now seen as perhaps the complete representative of Russian symbolism and modernism, and has left a considerable legacy. Over 7,000 of his paintings are exhibited in well-known art galleries all over the world. He also wrote many books on various subjects, including tales, legends, poetry, and commentaries on life and events. Another of Řeřík's legacies is the Treaty on the Protection of Artistic and Scientific Institutions and Historic Monuments, popularly known as the Řeřík Pact. This was an inter-American treaty stating that the defense of cultural objects is more important than the use or destruction of that culture for military purposes. It was signed on April 15, 1935, and although it never became international law, its ideas were extremely influential in setting standards for future cultural preservation. The 1934-5 expedition and mysterious ancient technology. In 1934-35, Nicholas Řeřík headed an expedition sent to areas of Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, and China by the US Ministry of Agriculture with the purpose of studying drought-resistant plants. Řeřík had considerable support from the US Secretary of Agriculture Henry A. Wallace, who himself had a deep interest in theosophy and mysticism. President Franklin Roosevelt, also no stranger to mysticism, being a Freemason himself, was also enamored of Řeřík. Some researchers question the stated nature of this expedition, believing it had more mysterious purposes. It is certainly true that the British Secret Intelligence Service had long suspected Řeřík of some undisclosed nefarious activities. One or two researchers even believe that Řeřík might even have been a spy for the Soviet Union. Indeed, by the end of 1935, both Roosevelt and Wallace were beginning to cut ties with 𝗓𝗡 due to his apparent pro-Japanese activities and contact with the Japanese War Ministry and Foreign Office during his time in the East. The Chintamani Stone. In 1933, 𝗓𝗡 painted a symbolistic work called the White Stone, sign of Cintamani or Horse of Happiness. In Buddhist and Hindu tradition, the Cintamani stone was said to be a wish-fulfilling jewel which fell from the sky in Tibet inside a chest filled with 3 other ancient artifacts. The Cintamani stone, which translates roughly to thought gem or wishing stone, is said by some mystics and paranormal researchers to be of an extraterrestrial origin and was brought to Earth by emissaries from a planet orbiting the star Sirius. It was given to Shambhala's principal resident, the mysterious king of the world, a monarch known by many Eastern mystics and only by a select few in the West. In Tibetan tradition, whoever held the stone held the key to Shambhala, a mythical kingdom in Tibetan Buddhism. According to one tradition throughout history, the Cintamani has been an important instrument of the divine, intended to guide humanity in the right direction, given freely only to those people thought worthy of its vast power. Such famous figures such as King Solomon, Genghis Khan, and Akbar the Great are said to have possessed the Cintamani stone. For a number of treasure hunters, the Cintamani stone is as real as the Philosopher's Stone or the Holy Grail, and many have searched in vain to find it. Apparently, 𝗓𝗡 knew that the Shambhala was believed to be the earthly link to heaven, and that its realm on Earth lay in a secret valley somewhere deep in the Himalayas. Some believe that 𝗓𝗡's expedition found the lost valley in the Himalayas and was also able to locate the Cintamani stone. Once he had obtained the fabled stone, 𝗓𝗡 apparently described it as a piece of moldavite, an olive-green or blue-greenish vitreous silica projectile rock formed by a meteorite impact probably in southern Germany. 𝗓𝗡 allegedly also discovered Sanskrit lettering inscribed upon it, which he translated to read, "Through the stars I come. I bring the chalice covered with a shield. Within it, I bring treasure." In one version of events, 𝗓𝗡 then took the Cintamani stone to Europe, supposedly to help form the League of Nations. However, after the collapse of the League, 𝗓𝗡 took the stone back to Tibet, where it's said to remain to this day. In his 1930 book, Shambhala 𝗓𝗡 records the following conversation about the Cintamani stone with a Tibetan Lama. Do you know in the West something about the great stone in which magic powers are concentrated? And do you know from which planet this came? And who possessed this treasure? Lama, about the great stone, we have as many legends as you have images of Chintamani. From the old Druidic times, many nations remember these legends of truth about the natural energies concealed in this strange visitor to our planet. Very often in such fallen stones are hidden diamonds, but these are nothing in comparison with some other unknown metals and energies which are found every day in the stones and in the numerous currents and rays. Lapis exilis thus is named the stone, which is mentioned by the old Meister singers. One sees that the West and East are working together on many principles. We do not need to go on to the deserts to hear the stone. In our cities, in our scientific laboratories, we have other legends and proofs. Would anyone have thought that the fairy tales regarding the flying man would ever be fulfilled? Yet now, each day's mail, each day's visitors may come flying.
Eyewitness reports of the destruction of meteorites over Siberia in 1984 and 2002 by Terminator spheres give further credence to the accounts of the 1908 Tunguska explosions and the ancient legends. We can assume that with their powerful electromagnetic charge, they were supposed to attach themselves to a flying meteorite and alter its trajectory so that it passed out of the Earth's atmosphere. If the meteorite's trajectory was such as to make deflection impossible, the Terminator simply destroyed the rocky splinters, literally melting the meteoritic substance, which subsequently hardened into tiny spherules. Numerous soil samples taken at different distances from the destruction site have yielded magnetite spherules containing up to 10% nickel, which supports the idea that they came from space. The magnetite particles display a great variety of shapes and different surface characteristics. Besides the predominantly spherical formations, one can also find drop-shaped particles that were produced by the spattering of molten meteoritic substance under the influence of the colossal temperatures produced by the actions of the spheres. Some spherules have a shiny surface, others have a matte, grainy and even finely porous surface, which is due in part to the meteoritic substance vaporizing when the matter was viscous. Often the spheres are hollow with a slag-like look to the inside. Sometimes one comes across conglomerations of magnetite and silicate spheres, indicating that they were formed at the same time and pointing to the complex composition of the Tunguska meteorite associated with the genesis of these spherules. Work carried out in 1961 established that there is a certain pattern to the distribution of these spherules on the surface. The greatest concentration of them is found in a strip 60 kilometers wide, extending northwestwards from the epicenter of the meteorite explosion, and which can be traced for over 250 kilometers. In the disaster region, covering an area with a radius of about 130 kilometers from its center at the 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 site, there are 3 identifiable zones of peat enriched with microspherules. The first, with a thin sickle shape, curves around the epicenter. The second reflects the movement of the unknown object in the region of zones 4 and 5, to the east and northeast of the 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 site in the upper reaches of the southern 𝗪𝗎𝗓 River, and thus coincides with the start of the disintegration of the meteorite. The third zone, very large and amorphous, is located precisely in the region of Voronov's crater. It is no coincidence that the microspherules in this area display certain peculiarities of structure and formation that set them apart from those in the other zones. As the destruction of the meteorite took place directly in the ground, and so material from the soil became mixed with meteoritic matter during vaporization. The bolide was completely vaporized by the explosion, and the products of that process were scattered in the form of extremely fine spheres over an area of 15,000 square kilometers. Their combined mass is estimated at around 10 tons. It is for this reason that all the expeditions that visited the area of the explosion found nothing of the meteorite itself, apart from a dusting of silicate and magnetite spherules that the blast wave spread across the entire Earth. Decades passed, and then on the 26th of February 1984, a meteor crossed the sky of western and eastern Siberia at a height of roughly 100 kilometers, precisely following the trajectory of the 1908 Tunguska body. At that time, passengers in a bus observed from an elevated section of the Myrny Highway far to the north a thin pillar of fire extending from the ground to the sky that then began to undergo various geometrical metamorphoses. The sight lasted several minutes. Fishermen in the area of the river Chona observed rising into the air from the hills to the north, the Valley of Death region, 2 enormous shining spheres that, gradually picking up speed, soared vertically upwards and disappeared behind the clouds. The whole event took several minutes, after which time the clouds continued to glow for a while. Then, without reaching the ground, the object exploded in a shower of sparks in the area of the river 𝗪𝗓𝗧𝗘. An expedition dispatched to that area found, as with the Tunguska event, no traces of meteoritic material apart from magnetite and silicate spherules. They discovered no large-scale uprooting of trees, as the explosion took place at great height. Drawing on data received from a military satellite, the US Department of Defense distributed information about a large meteorite falling in the area of 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧 in the Irkutsk region of Russia. The satellite recorded the appearance of a shining object at a height of 62 kilometers, moving at an angle of 32 degrees to the horizon. Observation continued to the point where a powerful explosion took place at a height of 30 kilometers. Preliminary calculations put the power of the explosion at an equivalent of 200 tons of TNT. The first interviews with witnesses to the 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 meteorite explosion pointed to a parallel with the Tunguska event in terms of phases of development. It is noteworthy that one of the witnesses questioned noticed that his dog became agitated and began to whine half an hour before the explosion. Here are some eyewitness accounts. Yevgeny Yarygin was on duty at the electrical distribution center in the settlement of Muscovite. I was on duty in the switchboard room whose window faces south. The weather was cloudy, rainy, and it was drizzling. We were sitting and chatting. A glow appeared outside the window. Shadows appeared. The light was coming from the window. Through the windows we could see a bright hemispherical glow beginning to rise from behind the hills to the southeast, at a bearing of roughly 160 to 170 degrees. The light was white, like you get in welding. The white light seemed to rise upwards, and behind it the light began to shift into the red and maroon. A red pillar was seen by the bus passengers before the 𝗪𝗓𝗦𝗧𝗘 explosion, and also by witnesses to the Tunguska explosion. Little rays were visible above the ascending hemisphere. The glow spread over the whole sky. The light was even and unbroken. We could not see any flying objects. The parting of the 𝗪𝗕𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘 stream, above the watershed of which the glow was rising, was brightly lit. Then everything began to dim and went out. The glow lasted around 10 seconds. I went onto the landing outside, went to the fence and opened the door. By then about 30 seconds had passed after the disappearance of the glow. There was a penetrating report, an explosion, a very sharp bang. It made your ears ring and even made you weak at the knees. Plaster came down in the building. Everything moved and shook. There was a single bang. That was at 7 minutes to 2. But a distant noise had appeared even before the beginning of the glow, something like the roar from an aircraft. Witnesses to the Tunguska explosion compared this noise with a 3-inch shell in flight. The sound came from the same quarter as the glow, but the bang came from the opposite side, where the glow had been heading. I heard that someone was sitting in an armchair at home, and the chair moved under them. Viktor Vedeshin, questioned by telephone on the 22nd of October 2002, said, "I was on duty that night at the boat station. A strong wind blew, and at the same time a strong glow appeared in the sky. It was white with a greenish tinge to it, bright like a welding spark or lightning, making your eyes hurt to look at it. Right then a shining flying sphere appeared. It flew beyond the horizon in the direction of Maksimiki." Vitaly Valyuk, who worked at the town hall in 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗘, noted, 8 minutes to 2 in the morning. Dense cumulus clouds in the sky. I was standing and smoking. Suddenly there was a flash. I thought it was lightning, but the glow grew as if someone was turning on one bulb after another. It became as bright as day. Some object flew from the southwest to the northeast. You couldn't tell if it was a sphere or not. It had a turquoise glow around it. It was perhaps the size of the lunar disk, and it had a tail behind it, reddish like the sparks from a bonfire. The angle of fall was about 60 degrees. The speed of the object was very high. While it all flew past, I had time to finish my cigarette, and 30 seconds later there came a rumble, like a distant explosion. 𝗪𝗘𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗧 reported it was 5-2. That light lasted a few seconds, then everything turned pink. Then it got darker and darker and darker, becoming a reddish light. Then there was a rumbling. You got the impression, well, I don't know, like something below the ground. Not clear, but dull. A subterranean rumble from the working complex was also noted by the witnesses to the Tunguska explosion, who compared it to the rumble of train wheels. And after that rumble, the window panes rattled. The glow was visible in the settlements of Kropotkin and 𝗪𝗧, located around 140 kilometers on either side of the object's presumed crash site. One of the witnesses stated, "Out of the blue my dog began to whine for no apparent reason. Suddenly we heard a strange noise, some kind of hum. 2 or 3 seconds later there was a flash, white at first, then blue, then red and white again. And then, about 3 minutes later, there was a terrific bang. The china all fell off the table." The object detected by the American military satellite was not a meteorite or bolide. Its instruments recorded the flight of the first Terminator as it plunged down to intercept the 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗧 meteorite, which gets its name from the place above which it exploded. A blinding flash lit up the tiger for a few instants with a bright light, like daylight, after which there came an explosion of such force that the blast wave, coming from a height of 32 kilometers, left all the dwellings for dozens of kilometers around without glass in the windows. The researchers who made their way to the explosion site indicated by the US satellite saw pines on the way with their tops and branches torn off. Yet when the instruments indicated they had reached their destination, they could not find a meteorite crater or even anything remotely resembling one. There was no large-scale uprooting of trees at the site because the first explosion took place much higher up than that at Tunguska and successfully deflected the meteorite away from inhabited settlements. However, significant uprooting of trees was observed, especially at the top of hills. After the first strike, which shifted the meteorite's course away from inhabited places, the other Terminator spheres closed in and began methodically destroying the remnants of the intruder from space. The blast could be felt across a radius of no less than 30 to 50 kilometers from the epicenter. It took the tops off trees. The blast wave left all the dwellings for dozens of kilometers around without glass in the windows. As with Tunguska and 𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧𝗧, all the expeditions that went to the 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧 region found nothing except magnetite and silicate spherules that resulted from the destruction of a meteorite likely to have been carrying dangerous microorganisms. Many witnesses saw that 2 large radiant points moved along the same course as the meteorite. For 2 days, these little stars lit up the tiger by night, as if they were looking for something. The same thing was reported by witnesses to the Tunguska incident. Many people said that after a glow was seen in the sky for several days, that was the result of the Terminator sphere's powerful influence. It should be noted that atomic explosions at altitude change the conductivity of the ionosphere. This inevitably leads to a disturbance in the Earth's magnetic field, a so-called geomagnetic effect. The geomagnetic effect of the Tunguska event was discovered in 1959 by 4 researchers from Tomsk. They found traces of an unusual disturbance in the geomagnetic field. This makes it possible to suggest that the destruction of the meteorite caused an unusual disturbance in the geomagnetic field, similar to a magnetic storm, with a sudden onset but unusually short duration. One of the oldest doctors in the Awaken autonomous region, Dr. A.N. Deskov, recollected that rumors of some afflictions did circulate among the Awaken after the Tunguska event. For all the uncertainty of the situation, nevertheless observed that, in conditions of a complete absence of physicians or indeed any medical care, isolated cases of radiation sickness may have gone entirely unnoticed.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.